It's the Adam Gold Show. I'm Adam Gold. Singer-songwriter Wednesday on the program. Graham Hill on the ones and twos. I'm sure Darin Gantt bops to this. He joins us on the Adam Gold Show from Panthers.com. We asked the old guy. So let me ask the old guy. This is the obvious question. Obviously, the mood is peppy. I'm sure America is coursing through the locker room on Mint Street. But was there a change in mood just with the decision to go to Andy Dalton from Bryce Young last week? Certainly it's great now because Dalton played fantastic. But what was your read on the mood with the decision to sit Bryce Young?
Well, I think there are a couple of things at play at once here, Adam. And by the way, I am down with America. I will listen to it. I was beside myself the other day. I got in my car and the Yacht Rock radio channel was gone from Sirius in its normal spot. That threw me for a loop. But as it pertains to the Carolina Panthers, I mean, everybody was ready to do something different, I think. I think guys were frustrated at struggles on offense. It wasn't personal against Bryce by any stretch of the imagination. He's still got a lot of supporters here and, you know, a belief that he can get himself right. But I think everybody kind of acknowledged needed to take a breath, needed to stop doing the thing you were doing that wasn't working and try something different. And because Andy's got such a gravity about him, I mean, it's not just that he's, you know, closer in age to us than a lot of other quarterbacks might be. It's that he's done some things. I mean, you play in the league 14 years, you've got a over 500 record, 100 more touchdowns and interceptions. I mean, he's got some credentials here that give him that little bit of gravity that they needed because they felt like they had improved the offensive line. They felt like the run game was ready to do some stuff, and they felt like there were some receivers in place that you ought to be making more plays. So I think when you do that, there's a natural – shot of adrenaline when somebody comes into a situation like that, when things haven't gone well, as long as you trust him. And Andy's a guy they trust. So, you saw what happened the other day. He was out there. And again, it feels strange to say that the only quarterback in the NFL to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a game was Andy Dalton. I mean, it sounds bizarre. We know he's capable of it. I think it kind of speaks to where the position has gone.
Right.
It's getting harder to find those guys. And, maybe it's because the college game is so different than the NFL game in a lot of really material ways. But Andy is capable of playing the NFL game and playing it pretty well. Yeah,
and he hadn't played a ton of football over the last several years, so he might be kind of a young 36, right? So, look, I'm not making – I mean, he might be. There's a little bit of tread left on those tires. Look, I'm not looking any further down the road than the next couple of games.
Yeah, to us, he's a young 36. I mean, to other people, maybe not. But,
he's probably not listening to America on his beats.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, he might. He's got kind of an old spirit. I'll have to ask him that later.
All right, so Darin Gantt is joining us. He covers the Panthers, Panthers.com. We asked the old guy. So he played great. By the way, we can have a longer conversation about the state of quarterback play in the NFL and how the college game impacts that, how the impatience with quarterbacks impacts that. We're staring at a situation where Trevor Lawrence, the first overall pick, several years ago, is likely going to lose his job. Doug Peterson is clearly feeling the pressure with the Jaguars because he might lose his as well. So we could talk all day long. And strangely enough, he's 6'6" and can't play the position, whereas everything we hear about is, bro, he's too short. That's not really the problem with Bryce. Do you think the coaching staff, which obviously it was very different from Sunday to Monday, and I'm not even going to get into the dynamics of that for fear of putting you in an uncomfortable and compromising position, Darin Gantt. But is it possible the coaching staff lost confidence in calling a game that maybe in some ways was risky, but also might have benefited Bryce by leaning more into a run, forcing the ball down the field a little bit more, but maybe not in the middle of the field?
I think there were things that could have been done differently. I think, and I don't mind saying this. I mean, the bottom line was Dave Canales made that change because he decided to coach the entire roster, and make decisions based on 52 guys and not just one. So, they felt like, again, there were parts of the game that could work better. I think there were things, the problem with Bryce in the first couple of weeks, it was like, it was so unlike what we had seen throughout training camp. I think that's why it was jarring to a lot of people. I mean, throughout the spring, throughout training camp, joint practice against the Jets, the greatest drive in preseason football history in Buffalo. All those things look completely unlike what we saw. And it's like when the first bad thing happened against the Saints in week 1, then we just went in the Wayback Machine to 2023. And it was Frank Reich. No, it's Thomas Brown. No, it's Frank Reich again. No, Frank's gone. No, all that back and forth and not really knowing, what was going on from one week to the next last season. But it looked like he had reverted a little bit. So that's what I think has caused a lot of people. If you hear guys in that locker room say, hey, Bryce is going to get this right. We believe that Bryce is going to get this fixed, and he can be the guy again one of these days. I think they're sincere in that because they've seen it. I mean, through the entire offseason, it looked completely different.
And there's no question it did. And that one series, actually, it's not that one. Forget about the series against Buffalo's uniforms, which you and I talked after that. I mean, I saw a couple of things that I didn't like, even though they went down the field and scored a touchdown. We don't have to get into that. But the joint practice day against the Jets, I remember talking to you about it afterwards. That was impressive stuff against a very good, albeit not completely healthy, but a very good Jets defense, where Bryce was basically the star of the day. Terrace Marshall was good. Jonathan Mingo was good. The offense looked functional, and something happened on the way to week 1 and then week 2, which was strangely enough significantly worse than week 1, and week 1 was bad. What do you think? How do they get Bryce, if that's still the plan? And it would be fair if it wasn't the plan, I believe. How do they get Bryce right?
Well, I think the first thing to do is sort of stop the bleeding. I've used the phrase "get him in out of the rain" a good bit in the last couple of days, and I think that's the first step, is prevent bad things from compounding. And now that they've kind of gotten him out of that cycle, is just let him watch Andy for a little bit. I mean, sit back and look at the things Andy's doing specifically in that pocket, specifically, certain things he was able to do offensively, certain throws he was able to make, and just be able to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. I mean, sometimes you just need to step to the other side of the room and look at it from a different perspective, and you might see it differently. But I think the other thing, that they've got to do, and I think this was important the other day, he was completely engaged in the process. If you saw the coin toss, I mean, he's out there standing next to Shaq Thompson, just a couple of captains, just like always. In the locker room after the game, there was a really neat picture, and I kind of saw it, and I included it in the mailbag yesterday. Jamie Robinson's dancing or something in the foreground of the picture, but in the background you can see Andy walking into the locker room, and Bryce goes over to hug him. I mean, he was plugged in, and he was still engaged in the entire process. And, I think that's a situation. It would be easy to mope. It would be easy to sulk or pout or something, or just be distant. I mean, it's kind of like you go through any life trauma, whether it's losing a job or a divorce or anything like that. What do? You go in a hole. You don't want to talk to people about all your bad stuff. But they kept him engaged, and he kept himself engaged, too. I mean, I think – that was the thing that I saw that kind of would suggest that he gets it and he's doing this the right way.
If Andy Dalton keeps throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, I can't even fathom when Bryce is going to get back on the field. Darin Gantt, before we let you go, at Darin Gantt on Twitter with 2 T's for extra talent. There's been a lot of talk about the Bryce Young era here is over. What do you make of any of that? Or at this point, do you even think about it at all?
Well, I mean, we addressed this in yesterday's Ask the Old Guy, as a matter of fact, and the way I described it there was, it's at least premature and possibly ridiculous. I mean, if you can get him back to the guy you saw at Alabama, the guy you saw all spring, you take the chance that you can get him back to that place. Because right now, if the only reason anybody would want to trade him now is spite.
Right.
Being angry at him and doing it for personal reasons. I mean, because that would be the ultimate sell low situation. I mean, let's trade a guy when his value's at its lowest. That makes perfect sense. What are we talking about? So
Right.
Get away from me with that. I just think that, for right now, let him sit back and watch. Let him learn some stuff from watching Andy do it a little bit and change his perspective a little bit, and then try to get him back. I mean, again, Dave Canales' whole jam is quarterback whisperer. His
Right.
whole jam is reclamation project. He did this with Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, who were less talented than Bryce Young. I was having conversations with people who've been around this division a long time and understand it. Middle of last year, even when things were sideways with Frank Reich, this guy looked at me and he said, "Well, you've got the best quarterback in the division." And that was at a time when Baker was playing okay. And I was like, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "It's not close." So, I mean, who am I to argue? This is a trusted voice. Let's put it that way. And, and from that point, the middle of last year, obviously, I mean, it never got any better last season. And the strange thing to me is how a guy can look so efficient against Green Bay on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And then just kind of the bottom falls out in his next 4 starts. So I think that's why, because it's so outside the norm, outside a standard deviation, that you just chalk it up and say, hey, let's, change gears, let's restart, let's see what happens next.
Yeah. One quick thing about Dave Canales, and then we'll say goodbye to Darin Gantt, is that it's possible that the reclamation project on Geno Smith, super effective, got him paid. Baker Mayfield, same deal, got him paid. Mm-hmm. Veteran quarterbacks who had played a lot of football in the NFL. And that's the only difference, and it's possible that Canales is good with those guys who have been there and had, to varying degrees, some success. Baker's second year in the league was pretty good with Cleveland, albeit I think there was the pandemic year, but it was still good, and they kicked the Steelers' rear end in the playoffs. Darin Gantt, Ask the Old Guy. Go check it out all the time at Panthers.com, at Darin Gantt, with 2 T's at the end for extra talent. My friend, I appreciate your time. We will talk. Good luck against the Bengals. They shouldn't be too angry this weekend at 0-3.
Queen City versus Queen City, and all I can tell you is Charlotte FC has already laid the wood to them. 3-1 earlier this season against Cincinnati FC. They don't have David Bell to kick around anymore in Cincinnati. So, that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to go downstairs and ask Andy Dalton, Bojangles or Skyline Chili?
Well, we know the answer to that. He's going to preach to the choir there, right? There's only one answer.
There's only one answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want spaghetti in my chili.
I mean, I enjoy it as a change of pace from time to time, and I'm all for everybody enjoying the indigenous food of their people. But for me, that's Bojangles.
Darin Gantt, thanks, man. I'll talk to you later.
See y'all.
You got it, Darin Gantt, here on the Adam Gold